Mary, you are CEO of one of America's most iconic, famous automakers. Frankly, it's kind of hard to know where to begin with the questions because between tariffs, EVs, China, your industry is facing a huge amount of uncertainty. So my first question really is, how does this moment compare to others in your 11-year tenure as CEO of General Motors?
Well, I think, in this last decade, there have been so many different things that have happened. If you think about COVID, if you think about the semiconductor shortage. So again, this is a period where we have change, but I think it's change that's going to strengthen the U.S. market, strengthen manufacturing in this country. And one of the capabilities we have now, because of all of the different challenges we faced, is the team is incredibly agile, and we can. What's the challenge? How do we move quickly to better position ourselves? And that's what we're in the midst of doing right now.
Okay, so I want to turn to some news, because we had a news announcement from you yesterday that GM is going to keep making V8 engines at a plant in New York, which you had planned to convert to EV motors. So should we take this as a sign that the future, at least in the US, is actually gas-powered and not electric?
Well, we still believe in an all-EV future. I mean, I think EVs are fundamentally better. We have work to do to continue to get battery technology to give us greater density, so we have farther range. We need to have a robust charging infrastructure. But having a next-gen V8 engine was always part of our plan, because this next engine will give the consumer more performance as well as more fuel efficiency. So we're very excited about this announcement. It's almost $900 million, the largest investment we've ever made in an engine plant, and it's good for the plant. I know they're having a celebration this morning to have the job security and to be working on really important technology, because our trucks are so important to people's lives, and especially in many cases their livelihoods.
So do you still see that all-electric future, and when do you think that the US might eventually get there?
Well, I think depending on what happens with the regulatory environment, and also I think what's actually more important is getting a robust charging infrastructure, as I mentioned, because I do believe the consumer is very rational. When you think about buying a new vehicle, a car, a truck, or a crossover, for most people, it's the most important or the second most important and expensive purchase that they make. So consumers are incredibly rational, and they need to make sure that vehicle is going to take care of their whole life. And so I believe as we continue to have great EVs, and I'm really proud, we have more EVs in the market right now than anyone else in this country. I'm very proud of what we have, and I think we're going to continue. We've been growing market share. We're now #2. I think we're going to continue. So I see a path to all EV. It will depend on how much we get the infrastructure ready, but I do believe we'll get there because I think the vehicles are better.
Well, what is GM's role in helping to create that infrastructure? I mean, you've made a lot of profit since 2023. Why hasn't any of that been plowed into building the kind of charging infrastructure that everyone says is necessary for EVs to really get off the ground here?
Well, it actually has. We're working with Pilot Flying J to get chargers on the interstates, and actually right now it's the highest rated charging experience, so we've partnered with the Pilot company to do that. We also are a part of Iona, which is a group of OEMs, car companies that have gotten together to collectively pool. We worked with Tesla, and we now have access to their charging infrastructure, and we've worked with our dealers, because our dealers know the local community and know where best to place the charging infrastructure. So we've been investing quite a bit, but I think we've got to get a little further, and I believe we will. I think every quarter the infrastructure gets a little better.
So I think everyone would agree that you're operating against a backdrop of a very challenging backdrop, but nevertheless there is a perception out there that GM has been flip-flopping on EVs, and in particular on emissions regulations. So we reported last week that GM pushed for Congress to repeal California's emissions rules, and these are rules that you did once support. So how can you be committed to the EV transition while also opposing the most stringent rules pushing the industry in that direction?
Well, what we're committed to is the customer. And the customer was telling us they weren't ready. I mean, the regulatory environment from a California perspective and the states that followed it was requiring that EV penetration be at 37% for new car sales. Last month, it was around 7%. And about 35% of the vehicles sold are in the states that were following that. So when we started to see this, I've been actually saying for a couple years now that I thought the regulatory environment was getting in front of the customer. And so, and I've always said we needed one national standard because that's going to allow the car companies to develop technology more efficiently and more effectively. So we went forward and tried to work at both the state and the federal level. So I think what happened in Congress last week was necessary to protect the customer and frankly to protect the jobs that are necessary. But make no mistake, as I said, we have more EVs available, from affordable EVs like the Chevrolet Equinox and the Chevrolet Blazer to luxury like the Cadillac Lyriq and the Cadillac Escalade IQ to super trucks like the Hummer and the Silverado. So we have a portfolio, we're committed, but frankly, this was necessary for the customer.
So, but on top of that, the House has also voted to end tax credits for EVs to make them more, which did make them more affordable. When do you now think customers can expect price parity between gas and EVs?
Well, I think we are working to improve our EV profitability every single day, and we have vehicles out there right now that are affordable. So for us, last year was a big accomplishment in fourth quarter to get to variable profit positive. We have initiatives, and we're investing now to continue to take cost out while not changing anything from a customer perspective, just improving the technology. And so we're going to continue to do that. But right now in the marketplace today, a consumer can get a vehicle that's at parity or very close when you take the cost of the ownership experience, price of gas, et cetera. Consumers can do that today.
And let's just talk a bit about batteries, because obviously that's the biggest cost in an EV, and you've made big investments in battery technology. But when do you think we're going to see real game-changing improvements that will really, truly cut the cost of an EV?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that we're one of a few OEMs that made the investment. We have two battery plants running, one in Ohio and one in Tennessee, and running at benchmark levels with our partner, LG Energy Solutions. So I'm very, very proud of that. But just last week, and it was actually covered in the Wall Street Journal, Kurt Kelty, who's one of the leading battery experts in the world, we're moving to what's called LMR battery technology, which will improve density by 30%. So you'll get more range for less cost. And so we think this is a big step that we'll be making in the next couple of years that is going to get us closer and closer to giving customers more range while improving the profitability.
Great. Okay, so obviously we need to talk about tariffs. Big story. Now, you've said that as a result of tariff costs, GM is facing costs of up to $5 billion this year alone, but so far you haven't raised your prices. How on earth are you, I mean, are we going to see price rises? And if not, how on earth are you going to absorb costs at that scale?
Well, there's many different steps we're taking. First of all, we're working with our supply base. One of the things from a GM perspective is all our vehicles made in North America were USMCA compliant, so that was an important piece. We understand that USMCA will be renegotiated. We'll continue to improve. And we had started actually after COVID and after the semiconductor shortage, we realized we needed much more supply chain resiliency in this country. And so we've moved over 25% to the United States. We only source of direct parts, there's only about less than 3% that comes from China today. So we're going to continue to smartly and effectively source our product in this country or in North America and make sure we meet the USMCA compliant. I think over the longer term, and there's announcements that we'll make in the coming months that I think will get us further to offsetting. And then, overall, one of the things I'm very proud of is we have great products that have allowed us to have appropriate pricing in the marketplace with lower incentives. So the consumer is speaking, saying, we want your cars and trucks and crossovers. And so we're very proud about that. So that puts us in a good position as we go into the market. There's so many factors that impact pricing, and it's something that's actually very dynamic. But we also know affordability is very important to the consumer. So we're balancing all those things, and we're trying to make changes to pay less tariffs because we're strengthening our U.S. manufacturing.
So no price increases in 2025.
I'm saying it's a dynamic situation, and we're going. Even before the word tariff was something we talked about a lot. The pricing in autos has always been very dynamic. You know, you add new features, you offer new options, and so it's something that is very dynamic, and we're going to work to make sure we remain competitive. But I'm very pleased that the strength of our products are driving the consumer interest.
So let's go back to talking about reshoring, which is a goal that you say you share with President Trump. But GM is also the biggest importer of vehicles to the US. Can you talk, what can GM realistically move back to the US without sacrificing profits?
Well, I don't think we're one of the biggest importers. We make over 50% of our vehicles at this here, and we make the majority of them in North America. We were complying with USMCA in the past. But I mean, I think there's decisions that we can make when we look at the entire equation, because we do think having a strong manufacturing base in this country is very important. We have capacity available in some of the assembly plants and engine plants that we have in this country that we're going to continue to utilize, so we can do it very effectively.
And have you talked to the president about this?
I've had the opportunity to talk to the president and his administration on a regular basis. And one of the things that I'm very appreciative is they have taken the time to understand our industry and understand the dynamics of our industry. I can't speak to all the other industries that are facing tariffs, but I can tell you for decades now, it has not been a level playing field for U.S. automakers globally with either tariffs or non-tariff trade barriers. So I think tariffs is one tool that the administration can use to level the playing field. And I also think it's important, maybe I grew up in manufacturing at General Motors, but I think having strong manufacturing capability in this country is also important.
So where do you think it's a dynamic, ongoing conversation around tariffs and autos? Do you think it's going to land somewhere eventually that's, you know, a more favorable picture than what we have now?
Clearly, it's a dynamic situation. A few weeks back, the president did make two very important decisions as it related to recognizing what we build in this country and making sure the tariffs didn't stack, because that was untenable. But beyond that, we know there's still a lot of discussions going on with all the reciprocal tariffs between Mexico, Canada, and many other countries. So I think it's still dynamic. But I think we're at a point now where we can look and make business decisions, to allocate product, and we'll continue to do that.
So, Mary, I have to ask, back in 2018, you managed to get on the wrong side of President Trump, and he was busy firing off disobliging tweets about you. You've managed things differently this time, and I'm just wondering, how are you handling the president differently today, or what did you learn from your experience in 2018?
Well, I actually think, when we didn't see eye to eye on some things, I think there was actually some things where General Motors could have handled some situations better. We had to do some restructuring, and I don't think we could have executed better, which I think would have positioned it a lot better. But I think even through that period and then beyond, we've always continued to have dialogue, and I think that's kind of the lesson learned. I mean, I've been very clear that I believe in electric vehicles, been very clear about the importance of manufacturing. And so, again, I think having that dialogue and continuing to make sure they understand our industry, because I think we do have a shared goal to strengthen it, I think has been beneficial. And staying on Trump's good side, part of the reason you took the diversity, equity, and inclusion language out of the GM annual report this year? Well, we're a federal contractor, and that business is very important to it, so we need to comply. We've made the adjustments that we needed to do to make sure we were complying. But when I step back and think about what makes a great workplace, I want to make sure, and this is something I've believed for years and decades actually in my career, is that people, no matter where you work, no matter what you're doing, you want to come to work and you want to feel valued. You want to make sure your work's meaningful, and you want to make sure you're listened to. And so that's what we strive to do every day at General Motors. We actually just had a process that had been going on where we were engaging the whole organization to update our behaviors to make them more action-oriented, because I just fundamentally believe believe when you have people who feel valued and feel that they're empowered to do their best work, it's better for the company, it's better for the consumer, and it's better for the shareholder.
Was there pushback from the workforce about the fact that you took that language out?
I haven't really received any pushback because we took the time to explain it. And again, at the end of the day, I ask often when I'm talking to smaller groups, or we do these things called super slices where we have a couple hundred people, and I'll say, how many people have ever not felt valued at at work? And I raise my hand. Been here 40 years, and then other people start to raise their hand, and they say, well, how does that feel? Everybody agrees it doesn't feel very good. I said, well, why would we want to make anybody feel that way? So let's all own this and work together. And when we have that kind of conversation, I think people get it, and I think it resonates.
So I want now to talk about China.
Okay.
So automakers in China are churning out tech-rich EVs at incredibly low cost, and they're developing new models at breakneck speed. So it looks as though the future of your industry appears to have shifted to China. How did they manage to pull ahead so quickly on EVs?
Well, I think the country has invested in EVs, and that's why I think it's important for the United States to still stay invested, and that's why we're making investments in improving battery technology, et cetera. But I think it's well understood that the auto industry in China is heavily subsidized, and they have excess capacity that they're then shipping to other countries around the world, and again, being subsidized. So I think when we look at that, we need to make sure that we can compete. I mean, we've looked at the vehicles, torn them down to understand, and we understand there's not like there's a technological advantage per se, but when you have a business being subsidized heavily, it's going to be harder to compete price-wise. So I think it's important that we step back and say, this industry, I believe, and I believe the administration and the previous administration and several administrations before that believe that having a strong manufacturing capability and auto industry is important, not only from an economic security perspective, but from a national security perspective. There's so many parts of our technologies that have defense applications. And so I think, and it's one of the areas where we see Congress aligned, is the importance of having the right innovation, technology, and leadership in this country.
But are you nevertheless worried that America might be falling behind here?
Well, I think we can't let ourselves fall behind. And that's why I think it's so important that companies, other companies, do what General Motors done and keep investing in the technology of the future, whether it's EVs, whether it's connectivity, whether it's artificial intelligence, with the ultimate application being autonomy.
So at the moment, it's all but impossible to buy a Chinese EV in America, even though everywhere else in the world, it's very easy to buy one. But one has to assume that eventually they'll make their way to the American market, perhaps because BYD will start manufacturing here, who knows. When that happens, how will GM compete? Well,
I think that's a conversation that we're having with the previous administration and now this administration of if you're going to have a heavily subsidized industries. We've seen other industries, what happens to them when they're being heavily subsidized for a long enough period of time that it erodes the capability that existed in country. And frankly, from a Chinese perspective, the battery technology that is now fueling their growth was actually developed in Texas. At a University of Texas, Austin, I believe is the university. So again, we've got to keep that innovation going. We have to make sure there's a level playing field. And again, that's where I see the president really, looking deeply to make sure that there isn't unfair advantages with other countries trying to displace the innovation in this country or the manufacturing, because I'm very proud of the fact that auto industry jobs are good paying jobs, and they really, many decades ago built the middle class and continue to fuel it today. So obviously this is a future of everything conference here. So I have to ask you, how are you harnessing the power of AI to change your manufacturing processes? Absolutely, we are. We just, a couple weeks ago, maybe it's a month ago now, we made an announcement with NVIDIA, whether it's, and there's several different projects we have going on in the manufacturing space, as well as the product development space. But one specific is using digital twins, so your factory's running before there's any piece of machinery on the plant floor that allows it to start up much more efficiently, takes cost and time out of the entire process. Like I said, we've got projects going where we're giving the tools to engineers so they can do more with the product, optimize it further. And then we have many projects in every single function in the company leveraging AI. And then finally, very excited that we just announced last week that Sterling Anderson is joining us, who has a huge background from not only autonomy, but AI. So I'm excited to see how we work together and take the company forward even faster.
So you're actually the longest tenured CEO at GM since the famed industrialist Alfred P. Sloan, and he led GM from the 20s to the 40s. As you look back, how do you think you've made your own mark?
Well, I mean, when I was into this place, the previous CEO, Dan Ackerson, who's to this day is still a mentor to me, he always said I was a transitional CEO from when, the restructuring that General Motors went through. So I think our focus has been on doing great product, bringing back the engine of innovation that was what fueled General Motors for its first really almost 50 years. I'll tell a quick story. One of the innovations I'm so proud about is, back when General Motors first started, you started a vehicle with a crank. And I'm actually told that's where the word cranky came from, because it was so hard to start a vehicle, and people would break their arms, or people of small stature couldn't drive. And General Motors was so customer focused and focused on innovation, they said, we've got to solve this, and we invented the electric starter. And so that type of innovation of really focused on the customer is something, and allowing great engineers to do great vehicles and giving them the tools and the resource. I often say to our chief engineers, if someone's not letting you do a great vehicle, because there's pressures from everywhere, I said, you should be in my office jumping up and down, because we know that's the secret. Nothing happens at General Motors till you sell a car. And so very excited about the portfolio that we have. And so what we're focused and committed to do is keep squarely focused on the customer and keep innovating, so we have vehicles that people want to buy, love to buy, beautiful design, technology, performance, all with an affordable price.
So one of the things that you're known for was cutting through bureaucracy. So now when you look back, was there anything that was harder than you expected when it came to tackling such things after you arrived as CEO?
I think a couple times maybe we got out in front of really listening to the people doing the work. There's a couple times, I shouldn't say we, I should say I. And I can go back and look at a couple different times where I think I was so anxious in saying, well, it all makes sense rationally, but it's so important to listen. And that's why we invested the time as we were updating our behaviors to make sure we listened to people across the organization globally to make sure we get it right. So you want to make change, you want to drive efficiencies, you want to reduce bureaucracy, but taking the time to listen is so important.
And I have to ask, do you have any successors in mind? I mean, I know you were always championed by your predecessor. How do you go about thinking about succession? Because it's obviously such an important thing for a big company like GM.
Well, it's something that we regularly review with the board. And so it's a standard process we've had for years now, and not just at the people that are at the most senior part of the company, but looking at next talent and beyond, and making sure that we have a rich pipeline. And I think because our industry is moving so fast, one of the things I'm proud of is we've been able to continue to grow and develop talent within the company that really knows how to do great vehicles, while bringing in software expertise from Silicon Valley, battery expertise, and now with Sterling joining. So we have found a way to bring together people who are new at the company with people who've been there for a while. And what I often find is they end up having this like, wow, what they do is hard. Wow, what they do is hard too. They work together, and I think that's what's important, because our industry is moving so quickly. You don't have time to get it 80% right. You've got to get it 90%, 100% right as you're launching, because the competition is moving so quickly.
So Mary, we started by talking about this huge amount of uncertainty that GM is facing with the sort of geopolitical backdrop and changes in the administration. What I want to know is, how do you personally, as the leader of this very big, famous company, how do you personally deal with the challenge of all this uncertainty?
Well, you know, for me personally, I find it's beneficial to take some time and not think about it. Because I find if you just keep thinking about it, you take a step away, and when you come back to it, you have new ideas.
So what's your chosen activity that helps take your mind off it all?
Well, I'm in the perfect town to do it because I love to I believe in retail therapy.
All right.
So.
Okay.
And so no, but for me, whether it's doing that, taking a walk, calling my kids, you know, catching a round of golf with my husband, I mean, those are things that I find that little break gives me the opportunity. When I come back, I just look at it differently. And then the other thing I find that helps is, you know, getting a small cross-functional group of people together and starting to talk about it, and we just build on each other, and then you find this solution and that solution. General Motors, when we have a clear, you know, whether it's a challenge or an opportunity in front of us, the team rallies and does amazing things. So I couldn't be more proud of them, but I find, you know, getting that little break so you kind of get you can give it a fresh look, and then working with people, talking with people that have different backgrounds than you to say, how are you seeing it? What could we do? We find solutions.
So you've cleared the afternoon for Bloomingdale's, right?
Not exactly, but maybe a moment.
Good.